Join the sexual evolution and get ready for Sex is Medicine. Sex is Medicine is your #1 resource for holistic sex education. Explore the connection between sexuality and spirituality, pleasure and personal growth. Discover the art of using pleasure as medicine and reclaim your birthright to more joy, more pleasure, and more satisfaction in every area of your life with Devi Ward.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Sex is Medicine, your #1 resource for holistic sex education. I am your host, Miss Devi Ward Erickson, and you can catch me here live the first Thursday of every month. And you can catch the replay all month long, ongoing, on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, all these wonderful places, iHeartRadio. So make sure you show me some love and subscribe so that you are notified of the latest episode for you to listen to and absorb all this wonderful information that we're going to be sharing with you this evening. So tonight I have yet again one of my favorite people to talk to, Dr. Paul Tanari. And Dr. Tanari was, there he is, yay, we have the two windows again. Dr. Tanari was my guest last month, and we were talking about male circumcision and the impact that has on female sexual health and wellness, which is not a connection that many people make unless you are very well-versed in this topic. And so I invited Dr. Tanari back for this evening, for this show, to have a conversation about the myth of frequent ejaculation. So this is a huge topic. As a Tantra educator for the last 10 years, one of the primary things that I love to share with men are skills and methods to help separate orgasm from ejaculation in the nervous system. For the process of becoming fully multi-orgasmic as a man, you have access to a multitude of different orgasms. And also to gain control over their ejaculatory response and ejaculate by choice, not by reflex. And all of my male students who have been practicing the semen retention methods that we teach talk about how revitalized they feel, how empowered they feel, how strong they feel, how their immune systems are boosted. It's just like an overall health and wellness tonic when they begin regulating their ejaculation and actually going from frequent ejaculation to infrequent ejaculation. So very regimented and strategic ejaculation cycle. So this flies in the face of it. It stands in contrast to some recent Western medical studies that seem or appear to indicate that frequent ejaculation is actually good for men's health. But when you start to dig more deeply into these studies, which I have done, what I have seen is that it does not actually indicate that frequent ejaculation is good for the male prostate. That's not actually what they say. And so in order to explain this more thoroughly, I wanted to invite my dear friend, Dr. Paul Tanari, to help us explore these studies and examine them with a critical and a professionally informed eye, because Dr. Tanari specializes in the ability to review studies and determine their flaws and their assets. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you again Dr. Paul Tanari, again, one of my favorite people to speak to about the topic of sexual health and wellness. Thank you for joining me again, Dr. Tanari.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Devi. I love your show.
Awesome, awesome. So would you help refresh us once again and share your credentials and why you're such a fabulous person to have this conversation with?
Well, I don't know if I'm a fabulous person, but I've spent my life learning, so I think that allows me to speak with some authority on some topics. So my background was originally in physics and engineering, right? And I graduated into a really bad recession, so all my job offers were canceled, and I had the opportunity to work in the Faculty of Medicine in the Department of Epidemiology. And my first reaction was, what's epidemiology? Anyway, so they got me doing statistical analysis for the doctors working in that faculty, and they said I was really good at it, so they started to pay for me to take epidemiological courses. I took medical courses with the medical students, and they brought me up to what would be considered a PhD level in epidemiology over a number of years. So that's how I got involved in epidemiology, but I'm able to give an enlightened viewpoint because I can work at the interface between physics and epidemiology. So for example, my PhD is in fluid mechanics, biofluid mechanics. So I'm able to understand the flow of fluids throughout the body, like the lymph. And this is why I've written books on how to activate the lymph in your upper body and how to minimize your risk of breast cancer by activating the lymph, by not constricting it, by wearing overly tight underwire bras and so on. That's all fluid mechanics, okay? Now, epidemiology is an inexact science, and it's because you're dealing with people, not machines, and people vary enormously. There's no one person who's just like any other person. Every person is unique in the universe, and that means it's very hard to do studies, okay? And the reason is also because the human mind is so powerful that it can dramatically interfere with the results of the experiments. So as an example, you can give someone a depressant, but tell them that it's a stimulant, and they will have all the physiological reactions of a stimulant, even though you've given them a depressant. So that's called, the placebo effect, and it's incredibly powerful. So that being said, the only studies which can be taken at face value immediately are double-blind studies, where if you're testing a drug, neither the doctor or the patient knows what drug they're getting, and they don't know what result they expect. So then you can truly get objective results. Now, when you do objective results on a drug like Valium, you find that 4 out of 10 people who are given the placebo will actually get the proper reaction, right? But 5 out of 10 who are given Valium will have the Valium response. So that 1 out of 10 is $1 billion a year industry.
Wow.
So you can see how fine a line you're crossing here. And it took 50 years to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that smoking causes lung cancer. That's how difficult. I mean, it seems obvious to us. You're taking in all these chemicals. Naturally, it's going to be harmful. But to prove the link between smoking and not breast cancer, but lung cancer took 50 years of epidemiological studies involving millions of patients. So,
all right.
So what I could tell to our listeners is that, because we're about to talk about studies in prostate, right? Is that when you hear on the news, CNN, CBC News, whatever, a new study shows this, okay? Always take it with a grain of salt, because unless they've had double-blind studies with hundreds and thousands of patients, right, over many, many years, the results are probably temporary and not valid for the general population. This is why the African HIV studies that seem to indicate a 60% reduction of HIV in circumcised patients are complete rubbish. They only used a few thousand patients over a few weeks, and they claim that proved the result. Well, that was garbage, and I criticized them immensely over this. So these studies we're going to be talking about are not definite. They're just evidence in a puzzle, okay? So I wouldn't recommend that people dramatically alter their behavior because of what we're about to say, but at least keep it in mind that there's some evidence, okay? So we're ready to start now. Okay, so.
Excellent, thank you, awesome. So let's go on. You have the mic, go.
Okay, there's a number of studies that have been done looking at the frequency of ejaculation and the occurrence of prostate cancer, okay? Now, it's interesting that some studies used to look at the frequency of intercourse, but then they realized that men ejaculate quite a bit more often than the number of times they have intercourse through masturbation, and especially nocturnal emissions, which are quite common in teenagers, for example, who are not having regular sex, right? And those are all important. So then they started looking at the number of ejaculations, okay? Now, this gets into the difficulty of extracting information in order to make a proper evaluation. Many men might not remember how often they masturbate, right? If you ask, how often did you masturbate 3 weeks ago? Well, I don't know. I think it's 3 times, maybe 4, right? They're not sure. So there's an uncertainty right there. Another thing is that many prostate cancers are internal, endemic to the prostate. They never go outside the prostate. They're internal. And unless you do a hormonal test, right, or a biochemical test, you won't know that the person actually has prostate cancer. So many prostate cancers are only discovered after the person dies.
Wow.
and an autopsy is done. So this leads me to a very important point here, and that is many men die with prostate cancer, not from it.
Wow.
It's a very slow-growing cancer, and often it's recommended that you do not have surgery.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a very slow-growing internalized cancer that has not gone beyond the prostate, just leave it alone. The acts of disturbing it will actually create more damage. And many men are very, very distressed by what happens after prostate surgery. For example, impotence, urinary incontinence,
Yes.
nerve damage. I could go on and on, all the complications from prostate surgery. It's major, major surgery because the prostate is buried deep inside the body. And to get at it, you have to cut through a whole bunch of muscle and nerve, right? So I would recommend, I mean, I'm not an MD, but talk to your doctor about this, is that, you know, do anything except prostate surgery until you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
Okay, so the problem is that how do you know if a man has prostate cancer? It can be difficult to determine. Once again, that's another uncertainty. However, the studies that are out there have gone both ways. Some indicate that, especially in younger men, that the frequency of ejaculation slightly reduces the risk by a few percentage, 5–10%, the risk of prostate cancer. However, there's some studies done in older men that indicate that high frequency of ejaculation actually increases slightly the risk of prostate cancer, right? So on average, it does nothing.
Well, and then the other thing, because that's what I read too, that in some studies it shows that, I mean, in the same study. So one of the studies that I'm looking at is a study from 2016 by the European Neurology.com, blah, 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 blah. And it was the final study that they've done over a series of studies. And if I just may interject, so there were a number of issues that I found with this particular study with my, whatever eye, but just off the top, it was like, number one, they only interviewed white men.
Yes.
So this is a study for all men that they only took data from one particular genetic, ethnic,
that's right,
whatever. Like that right there, I think would disqualify the study. If you're only looking at the effects for all men on only white men, that's problematic to me, number one.
But that's problematic because men of color, African American, Canadians, and Americans are known to have higher rates of prostate cancer. Right? So immediately qualified a whole chunk of the population.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And then the other thing is, you mentioned like asking men to remember, how often did you masturbate and ejaculate, a month ago. Part of the way they collected data for the study was asking men in their 70s to recall their ejaculation frequency when they were in their 30s. So there's a 40-year gap. And they're documenting their responses as if they're factual, right? So that right there is flawed. And then the other thing that they were not, which you and I have discussed, which they were not determining, is the difference between ejaculation and orgasm. So we know orgasm has all kinds of health benefits to it. So is it the orgasm that's causing, the lack of prostate cancer, or is it the ejaculation? They're not studying men who are having non-ejaculatory orgasms.
Yeah, well, my own research, I do medical research, as you know. My own research indicates that orgasms for both men and women are highly beneficial biochemically, right?
Yes.
So if you put a tap into a vein, right, after orgasm, you can see dramatic changes in the brain's biochemistry. The cortisol, which can actually kill you, it's a harmful hormone, a stress hormone. In Japan, they have a name for people who work themselves to death. I don't remember what the name is, kaizen or something. Anyway, they work themselves to death, and it's cortisol that kills them, right? Well, orgasm takes the cortisol, converts it into serotonin, which is the well-being hormone, right? This is why people who orgasm regularly have better life expectancy, better health outcomes, and so on. We talked about last week or last month. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So getting back to the prostate study, as the evidence seems to point both ways, that in some cases more ejaculation is good, in some cases more ejaculation is bad. So what I would recommend, though, is thousands of years of evidence of practitioners of Tantra has shown that enormous health benefits to tantric practice. Okay, so I work with both men and women, right? And I find it's incredibly helpful for women to start doing tantric practice, as I define in my book on lymphatic health, where they masturbate to the edge of orgasm, but don't experience the orgasm, and they hover for as long as they can. Men can do exactly the same thing. Instead of going for the orgasm, you hover in a pre-orgasmic state as long as possible. And then when you're both able to do this as partners, you can now share this. Mm-hmm. So you do either manual or intercourse or oral, right? But you don't allow the partner to orgasm. You keep them in a hovering state. And as you get to know your partner, you get to know how to provide just the right amount of stimulation so that you get them in the hovering state. Now, studies have shown that this activity has the same effect as orgasm. It converts the cortisol in your brain to serotonin, right? So it has all the benefits of orgasm. And in fact, when you do this for a long, long time, your pre-orgasmic state becomes more intense than your orgasms used to be.
Yes.
So you can have an orgasm that lasts 15 minutes or more.
Well, exactly. So I'm going to interject here because I'm so excited about this. But this is what, so we make a distinction in our teaching, a distinction between climax and orgasm.
Yes.
So what most people think of as an orgasm is a climax, right? It's a sharp peak, an explosion, and then a decline. But an orgasm is actually a peak of pleasure or a peak of sensation. And so that hovering state that you're talking about, that is peak, that is orgasm. And that's what I would call an extended orgasm, where you're just hovering is such a beautiful word, or hanging out, relaxing into this peak of blissful pleasure without rolling over the edge, without having the explosion.
Exactly. And having experienced this myself, one of the highest levels of sexual experience you can have with a partner is both partners are trained in this technique.
Exactly.
And during intercourse, instead of both going for the orgasm, you go into a hovering state in which you literally melt into each other's energy, and in a hovering state for as long as you want, a half an hour if you want. And that is a ultimate bliss, if you like. And so then you can finish off with allowing each other to climax, right, if you want. Okay, but you don't have to.
So let's talk about, because one of the things that I love teaching men, and I love watching them blossom, is teaching them to have non-ejaculatory climaxes. So there's two stages to the male ejaculatory orgasm. There's the emission stage, and when we're in that hovering, that peak stage and hovering, that emission stage is happening where the fluid is filling the prostate, and prostate's contracting and all of that, and that's an orgasm. That's the first stage of orgasm. But then the climax is the expulsion. Right. So what I love doing is teaching men how to separate those two phases, so they're able to have climactic orgasms with no actual expulsion. So that's the key that men get concerned about in relationship to this study. They get concerned that if they're not having the expulsion stage of the orgasm, that they're going to somehow get sick, that's going to damage their prostate. So in your opinion, is it safe for men to have peak orgasms with no expulsion?
Yeah, okay. So looking from an epidemiological point of view, there's a lot of theories as to how ejaculation could reduce prostate cancer risk. For example, there may be accumulation of toxins within the seminal fluid, which is produced by the prostate, right? And then emission takes these toxins out. That would be the most obvious thing.
But wait, can I pause you there? I want to interject. Because here's the thing. Semen is baby batter. So are you telling me that when my husband is ejaculating inside of my vagina, he's depositing a bunch of toxins into my vagina with his semen?
Well, the concentrations are low. We're not talking about toxic waste here. We're talking about parts per million or parts per billion, right?
All right. So it's a low concentration of toxins, so I'm not going to get toxified. So that low concentration of toxins, is that going to metastasize into cancer?
Hopefully not. My studies indicate that toxins that are released are at very low concentration, and your vagina is perfectly capable of handling concentrations like that. It's not going to hurt you, burn you, toxify you, right? But for the man, it's good to have the withdrawal of these low concentrations of toxin, right? That's one theory. It's not proven. It's a theory. Now, to show how difficult these studies are, that they believe that, if you observe that men who ejaculate more frequently have higher rates of prostate cancer, let's say hypothetically, let's say you observe that in a study, Well, is it because they're ejaculating more frequently, or is it because they're having more sex and thereby getting exposed to more STDs? Right? There's a theory that STDs may increase the risk, not proven, may increase the risk of prostate cancer. So men who are having more sex have more risk of getting an STD, therefore more risk of prostate cancer under this hypothesis. You can see the complexity of this. You can't just definitely say, yes, the science is set and that's it. Yeah, every study uses different cohorts, they're called cohorts, groups. Now you have white males, right, who have a certain genetic characteristic. You have African American males who have another genetic characteristic. They may be more prone to prostate cancer genetically. Okay, so irrespective of how often they ejaculate, they'll have a higher risk. See, so this shows how difficult it is to get a random sample for your study. It's incredibly difficult. Like I sometimes want to throw my computer at the wall when I see some of the studies that have been done. For example, there was a study done by a women's studies department, which came to the conclusion that 98% of women were abused. And I looked at the details of the study, and they had a questionnaire that was given in a battered woman's shelter. Well, that's not a representative sample of a random sample of women, right? Yeah. So of course you can skew the results that way.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened in the African studies on the relationship between HIV and circumcision. They had all types of, it's called co-founding factors. For example, they didn't test for homosexual sex. They didn't test for IV drug use, which is a big source of HIV infection, right? All those things were not tested for, right? Now, some people who are pro-circumcision, like the famous Dr. Pollack in Vancouver, points to the AAP, American Association of Pediatrics, who said, the only organization in the world, the only one that said, the evidence shows that the benefits outweigh the risks in circumcision. And they're the only group in the world that said that. But if you read the details of their report, they did not look at any of the long-term complications of circumcision.
Yeah. Well, yeah. They're biased.
It's like doing a study of car accidents and only studying parked cars.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's ridiculous, exactly. Right? Exactly. And they also ignored the death rate. There's a death rate in circumcision. They ignored that. So that's how they came to that conclusion that the benefits outweigh the risk. It's rubbish, right? And that's why the entire world essentially has protested the AAP. Because that's epidemiology.
Because that's the thing I often talk about in studies. It's like, the studies are limited by the perception of the scientists doing the study. So like if a scientist doesn't know that there's a difference between orgasm and ejaculation, they're not going to be looking for that. And a few other things that this study, it actually says in the study that that they speculate that maybe it's the pleasure of the orgasm and the psychological release of tension during the orgasm that lowers, that relaxes the sympathetic nervous system. And that's why there's less frequency of prostate cancer. And they also talk about how the men who are having more sex are generally more healthy anyway, right? Okay. So if you're not even masturbating at all, so your ejaculation frequency is really low, it may be because you're depressed or you have some other health issues going on that are impacting your sex drive. And maybe that's the reason that you're getting prostate cancer. So there's so many flaws in this study, so many things that they're not taking into account. And what pains my heart is it being spread as absolute fact, that the facts that this study says for sure that there's a correlation between frequent ejaculation and diminishment of prostate cancer, when the actual study does not even say that. The actual study says like 20 contradictory things, like you mentioned, and does not take into account the fact that men who are more sexually active in general are healthier in general because they're having more connection in their life. If you're having a high sex drive is an indication of good health in many cases, right? Yeah. So there's all kinds of factors that are not being taken into account in regards to this study.
Yeah, you would have been a good epidemiologist, Devi.
Thank you.
Yeah, you said it exactly. I could not say it better. And it shows the complexity of this. And so it should be stated is that in these areas of high complexity, the science is never settled. So when I hear people in climate science, which is incredibly complex, there are thousands of factors influencing the climate, much more than CO2. right? And when I hear someone says, the science is settled, climate is changing, right? That is rubbish, because that's contrary to the whole spirit of science, where there's always new discoveries being made, which may reverse everything you knew before, right?
And and that's so true in the field of sexology, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not widely studied. And again, it's being studied by people who have these particular blinders in place.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's why in these areas, it's so hard to get clear-cut results, right? And as I said at the beginning, the only study which is beyond reproach is a double-blind study, which of course is impossible to do with circumcision or with prostates, right? The guy either ejaculates or he doesn't, right? He can't have a double-blind study. But with drugs, you can have it, right?
Yes.
Some people are getting the placebo, some are getting the drug. Neither the doctor nor the patient know which one is which.
Well, I have a question for you in regards to double-blind study. So what do you think about doing a study on men, the prostate health of men who are having frequent non-ejaculatory orgasms, who are their actual ejaculation frequency maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month, but their orgasm frequency is several times a week?
Yeah, that's the sort of study I would like to do.
Can we do it? Can we do it?
That being said, it is known that you do not have to ejaculate to get the benefits of orgasm, right?
Exactly.
So men can orgasm without ejaculating. They get all the benefits. The biochemical changes in the brain occur, right? Now, the big advantage for a man is that if you're having non-ejaculatory orgasms, you're getting the serotonin in your brain, which gives you an incredible feeling of de-stressing and well-being. At the same time, you're not going to lose your orgasm, because many men lose especially older men will lose their erection after orgasm. Young men can orgasm several times, ejaculate several times, but older men, I tell you, they can't. It's very difficult. And so they can maintain their erection and then keep on having sex for a very long time, having orgasms along with their partner. And that's a very beautiful, satisfying experience, rather than just orgasming and going to sleep.
Tell me about it. I mean, and that's the thing. So again, when we're talking about we're talking average Western, male statistics, the average time of sexual penetration is 2 to 7 minutes.
That's right.
But we know that it can take the female body, the internal erectile tissue, 20 to 45 minutes to become fully engorged.
Yeah, according to Masters and Johnson's, who did a lot of this early research, in some religious groups I will not name, average penetration time is 6 seconds.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so for so many in heterosexual relationships, heterosexual pairings, for so many women, they don't even have a full erection before their partner's over.
That's
so
right.
For men learning to hover, like you say, and to extend their ability to make love for longer periods of time, that leads to so much more relationship satisfaction, emotional fulfillment, sexual satisfaction. Like, I've seen marriages stay together because the male partner learned how to control his ejaculatory response, have non-ejaculatory orgasms, and he and his female partner can make love for hours together. And yes, exactly, have orgasms together. Right. So, and I'll ask you, because you probably know this. So my experience when my male students and my male partners have described their non-ejaculatory orgasms, the way they describe it, it sounds very similar to what I experience in my body as a vaginal orgasm. Has that been your experience?
Yes. Yeah. So when men have a non-ejaculatory orgasm, they get the PC muscle contraction, the pleasure involved in the contraction, but without the ejaculation.
Yes.
Right. So that's the only thing that's missing is the sperm shooting out. That's it. But everything else is there, and they can repeat that again and again. So in my clients, my patients that I work with, both male and female, I recommend that they do tantric exercise several times a day, like more before they go, when they wake up in the morning, before they go to bed at night, and several times in the washroom throughout the day. Right. So women who are really versed in this exercise can take about 20 seconds to enter a pre-orgasmic state with training. Most women require about 10 minutes at first, but with training, they can 20 seconds, and then they can hover in this pre-orgasmic state for as long as they want, right? Similarly with men, by not ejaculating, you can experience the hovering stage whenever you masturbate, right? And then it's necessary for men to ejaculate sometime because sperm is continuously being produced. right? The testicles are just every day manufacturing new young sperm, right? So it's necessary to clear out the older sperm. So what I recommend is when you're masturbating, you do not ejaculate. You just do a hovering. Then when you get together with your partner, whether it's 3-4 times a week, then you ejaculate at least 1 or 2 of those times to clear out the sperm, right? And so you get the benefits of tantric work along with the physiological, psychological benefits of ejaculating.
Yeah, and so that's what you make another good, very important point when it comes to semen retention. So there's different views on semen retention. And just to clarify, when I say semen retention, I mean the ability to orgasm without ejaculating.
Right.
For some people, when you say semen retention, that means abstinence. They mean either like celibacy or no sexual stimulation. But when I say semen retention, I mean full sexual activation, full orgasm, no ejaculation.
Right.
And so when you move into that realm, there's varying theories. Like some people, like you recommend, ejaculating with your partner, whether that's once or twice a week. I actually usually recommend a longer ejaculation frequency depending on the aptitude of the male. So when a male is just starting out, and if he's been ejaculating, every day for the last 20, 30 years, there is a process of regeneration that needs to occur. And so I was instructed in the Taoist tradition that when a man's starting out, to ejaculate no more frequently than he would do a whole blood donation. And so that's every 6 to 8 weeks. And that's while they're in the regenerative phase. But they're not just stopping ejaculating, they're also doing pelvic floor exercises, they're also doing tantric meditation practices, they're also doing breathing exercises. So it's this holistic program that they're doing to complement the semen retention. And then after this period of 6 to 8 weeks, if a man is doing a lot of Tantra yoga practice, usually he needs to actually increase his ejaculation frequency to help balance out his energy. If you're doing a lot of energy body yoga practices, like we teach in the Tibetan tantric practices, then I've actually found that men, if they don't ejaculate frequently enough, they actually start to get agitated and kind of freak out. They get overwhelmed with energy because they're constantly building their energy through these energy yoga practices. So it can be different. There's a science to ejaculation frequency, and it really can vary from man to man and where he's at his level of practice.
Right. Yeah. There is a theory in Chinese tantric practice that the seminal fluid can be reabsorbed into the body and can enter into the chakras and flow through the body. Okay. Well, I can't verify that, but I know when I was learning this practice when I was in China, right? I would have nocturnal emissions where I would ejaculate, right? Because I was holding in my seed, right? And my body said, nope, this has got to go, right? So whether I wanted to or not, I ejaculate, right? Now, that may not be such a problem. I was quite young when I did that, but for older men, that may not be such a problem because the rate of semen production falls.
Yes. Okay, so that's good to know. So as you age, the rate of semen production falls. So, and that's also one of the things that I in my work as well, when I was training, is a young man as a teenager or in his early 20s can ejaculate a lot. But as you hit, you get into your mid 20s, you want to start regulating to the science behind it is a man under the age of 35 takes 3 days to recover from ejaculation. Over 35 takes 8 days. And there's actually a Chinese study that tracked the testosterone levels in men's blood before and after ejaculation. And they found that after ejaculation, their testosterone levels plummeted. They stayed down. They stayed at 0 for the first 3 days. After 3 days, they started to rise. And then at the 8th day, they were back up to normal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point for semen retention, as you call it, because you keep your testosterone levels high.
Yes.
And so many people, I should say, when you start doing these exercises, feel very frustrated because they're used to ejaculating or climaxing for women, right? But if you hover, you eventually get to a point where you feel empowered and energized, and you look forward to these exercises as the high point of your day, energizing yourself. And for example, when I started to master these techniques after the first couple of years, my sleep went down from 8 hours down to 5 because I needed less sleep.
Exactly.
Right now I'm down to 4 hours a night is all I need. Right?
That's
Why?
amazing.
Because I've done Tantra for 35 years. Right?
That's amazing. And so you talk about some of the biochemical changes that occur in the body at these peak states of orgasmic pleasure without going over the edge, but in those hovering states. So aside from changing the cortisol to serotonin, what are some of the other benefits of these extended orgasmic states?
Well, there's a lot of biochemical changes which I could describe, but won't mean much to most lay people. Like, for example, normal sperm produces, the prostate produces citrate, right? You know, the citric cycle in the cell, right? And high citrate levels are normal in healthy sperm, right? When you have cancer, for a reason that no one really understands, the citrate levels start to fall. Okay, so by maintaining high levels of citrate, you may actually be immunizing yourself from cancer, you see. So there's another biochemical benefit.
Wow. Wow. So that benefit occurs from not ejaculating the semen.
Not ejaculating, keeping the citrate levels really high in the prostate, yes. Because
that's like the antithesis.
Cancer cannot live in a high citrate concentration.
That's amazing. So that's like the antithesis of the study is the more that you actually have in the body, the high, it could actually be a cancer preventative.
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of things that are different about cancer cells than ordinary cells. One of them is their immortality. They multiply endlessly. They never stop. Okay, so their immortality is one thing, but they're also more sensitive to heat than normal cells. This is why there's a thing about heat therapy that might actually. They're also more sensitive to certain wavelengths of light. So I've heard of a laser therapy where you inject a dye which gets selectively absorbed by cancer cells, and then they put a fiber optical cable into your vein and then fire the laser into your blood, and any cancer cell that flows by zaps itself through the absorbing the laser light. So there are methods of treatment. I myself am working on a cancer treatment which is based on having a long molecule that at one end ties to a protein that's been identified in the cancer cells, and the other end is a ferromagnetic bit of a molecule which will be affected by magnetic fields. You inject this into the blood, and it gets attaches itself to the tumor because the other end of the protein locks into the cancer cell. And then you put a very high varying magnetic field over the tumor, and it blows itself up because the heating is so dramatic that it kills the cancer cells, but not normal cells. So but you know, getting that past the FDA is going to take years. But it's an idea I have that I'm trying to commercialize. Anyway, so prostate cancer is like other cancers in that to protect yourself, use your common sense. Don't smoke. Don't drink excessively. Those are the major causes of cancer that are in your power right there. You can't do much about your genetics. You can't do much about, but you know, avoid blatantly unhealthy foods. You know, try and eat healthy. I mean, that means you can't. I'm not saying never eat chips or anything. I'm saying, you know, try and eat a balanced diet that's not overly rich in fat, too heavy in meat, too heavy in saturated fats and so on. You know, so if you just do common sense things, you can dramatically reduce your risk for a broad spectrum of cancers, right? Like, for example, there's a huge component to prostate cancer in smoking, just like there is in breast cancer, right? Breast cancers can be reduced by quitting smoking, right? Similarly, alcohol. If you're a heavy alcohol consumer, you're increasing your risk for a number of cancers. Right. So, for example, my mother was an addict of barbecued meat, and every weekend, her and her boyfriend barbecue meat. And I kept saying, you know, Mom, that's not such a good idea. Then she ended up dying of intestinal cancer. I'm not saying it's a one-to-one relationship that the barbecue caused the cancer. It certainly increased her risk.
Yeah, so what it boils down to is that frequent ejaculation is not necessarily preventative for prostate cancer. In fact, the studies do not actually say that. The studies themselves are to be taken with a grain of salt. And I love the reference that you made to, you know, thousands of years of study in the Taoist tradition and the tantric traditions from the East that very clearly state that semen retention is actually men being able to cultivate their sexual energy so it doesn't get stagnant, because stagnancy leads to illness, right? So cultivating their sexual energy, but then retaining the semen and having infrequent and planned ejaculations are actually beneficial for a man's overall health and wellness. And I love that. In 5,000 years of practice or more, it would be interesting to see if there were any instances of prostate cancer in these men. It certainly is epidemic in these days, and which has a lot to do with cultural factors, as you were pointing to. But I think it's very, very, also very important to mention, because this is, another one of the questions we get, that it's very important that you're practicing semen retentions properly. Because there are folks who like to do research online and read things and try methods, and they're implementing them incorrectly. And some of the semen retention methods that are used, if you implement them incorrectly, you can actually harm yourself. Yes. So having guidance about the proper implementation of the methods is actually very critical. You can't just do it yourself and try and figure it out and think that you're doing right. Yeah,
I'm very happy you mentioned that, because one thing I really wanted to stress to our listeners is that it's incredibly dangerous to actually begin an ejaculation where you're in the process of ejaculating, and if you or your partner blocks the duct, the urethra, you can actually blow out your vas deferens, which is where the sperm is produced. And this happened to one of my friends in university, where he was in the process of ejaculating, and his girlfriend squeezed his penis really hard and blocked the ejaculation. And when she released, blood poured out of his urethra because he'd blown out his vas deferens. Fortunately, the damage wasn't permanent, but that's a danger. So once you start ejaculating, do not
just
block
let it go.
Let it
exactly.
go. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. And make sure, and again, properly implementing the method. Like if you're pressing on the urethra, that's going to hurt you. Don't do that. So you have to make sure that if you're using some of the blocks or the manual holds, there's a variety of them, that you have the correct guidance to make sure that you're doing them properly. And like, I love that you said that, to not block an ejaculation when it's already started. So you want to make sure you're doing it before the expulsion stage. So that's the key, is separating that emission stage from the expulsion stage and making sure that you're preventing the expulsion stage from even happening. Yeah, another point, this is a little more rare, but it's worth noting, and that is if you're receiving oral sex from your partner, if you're a man receiving oral sex, and normally if you ejaculate into her mouth or elsewhere, you're cleansing the whole urethra, right, from bacteria. But if you do not ejaculate, you're doing hovering, it's very important that afterwards you go and urinate. And the reason is there's bacteria in the mouth that will enter into the urethra and can cause prostatitis and a number of other problems. Okay, so it's very important that both men and women urinate after sex to clear out the urethra. Thank you. Yes, I was going to say that too. That's very true for female bodies as well, to pee after any kind of mucous membrane contact to ensure that you're flushing that tube. Yeah, so if you do that, you'll reduce your risk of both bladder infections, UTIs, kidney infections, which are much more dangerous. Right? Yes, absolutely. Here's another point, and that is that it wasn't so long ago that life expectancy was below 40 for both men and women. Right? In 1900, life expectancy was 40 for both men and women. That's not so long ago. My grandmother was alive then. Right? And so people died very young. In their 30s, they were already old. Now, but throughout history, historians have noted that practitioners of Tantra, Taoist masters, Tantra masters, all types of similar areas of study, they tended to live very old, 80s, 90s, 100s. And this was at a time when most people had died 40 years earlier, right? So why was that? Well, it's because they were maintaining their health. Yes, 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 and maintaining their health through conscious sexual practice. That's right. That's the key, because there's a vast difference between, what I've observed in my life is someone who's just kind of hovering along and maintaining their health, and someone who's trained in cultivating and utilizing that sexual energy. And I've seen that so often. Like my teacher, my lama, is 80, and he's a robust, vibrant, healthy man who's still fully sexually active, to my knowledge, right? Yeah. So, I mean, he looks like he's in his 50s, maybe 60s. And then there's also other female tantrikas in the industry who are amazing, and they're in their 60s and 70s. One of my mentors, Carla Tara, she's got to be in her 70s now. She looks like she's 40. She is amazing. And so it's the regenerative, like you were talking about the biochemical changes, but it's the regenerative quality of sexual energy and having instruction on how to utilize that energy and run it through the body and use it to enrich the energy body and enrich the physical body. And then again, it's very important to maintain, for you male-bodied beings, maintain an ejaculation frequency that's in sync with your needs. And what I've learned, part of my training many years ago, it was like 10 years ago, so it comes back every now and again, but what I've learned through experience and working with so many men is that the ejaculation frequency that seems to work best for men, how you know that your ejaculation frequency is correct, is when you feel it revitalized and enriched after ejaculation.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that your experience as well?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So, it's incredible to me how bad most people feel most of the time. And I call that debauched kinesthesia, where wrong has been wrong for so long, it feels right.
Yeah. And it's a shame, because my belief as a Buddhist is that we are Buddhas. The human body is designed to be fully realized. And what it means to be fully realized is to live in peace and joy and bliss and creativity and openness and passion. Like, that is our birthright. That is what we're here for. And to be experiencing anything less than that is symptomatic of trauma and wrong society, wrong view of life. So
let me give you a couple of case studies really quickly.
Yeah, I'd love that.
I met a patient who had pain just between her breasts for 20 years. She thought that was normal, right? She just had pain, and no matter what she did, it didn't seem to change, right? And I met her and I said, "You've had pain for 20 years?" And yeah, I've told my doctor, but they don't know what it is, right? I said, "Well, first of all, take off your underwire bra. Okay, so let me massage the lymph channel that's right going between your breasts here, right?" And I opened up both the lymph channels, and within 5 minutes, the pain was gone for the first time in 20 years. That's all it was, a blocked lymph channels, because she wore underwire bras all the time. Wow. Simple treatment, right? Yeah. Now, our listeners might wonder how powerful you can get if you really are dedicated to do these exercises. Well, I can tell you, I met a grand master, tantric master, when I was in the Orient, right? And this guy was in his 90s, right? And he also had a sense of humor, which made him an interesting character, right? And his English was pretty good, so I could talk to him, right? What he used to do is he used to go on crowded subways in Tokyo and crowded buses, and then he would start doing his deep breathing exercises, and he'd start creating a vortex of energy around himself. So his chi was so powerful, he could actually extend outside of his body, and he would give powerful orgasms to all the people standing within a meter of him. And of course, he wasn't touching them, so they would look around and have no idea what was going on. And he thought this was funny, right? So you see the sense of humor, right? So you can see how powerful you can become, where you can just hold your hand over someone's genitals and provoke a powerful orgasm. I've seen this.
Exactly. Well, yeah, that's the thing. The energy orgasms. That's a thing. That people want to practice and celebrate and experience, because how amazing is it to be able to respond to energy that profoundly? It's an amazing thing. It's like we're as a society we're not even like accessing the tip of the iceberg of our true human potential. And I love the intersection.
This is what I tell my patients is that, especially women in their 50s and 60s that I work with. Many women who reach their 50s have had children, they've been married for 35 years, divorced, married again, right? And they think, oh yeah, I've experienced it all, right? It's fine, I have my vibrator. They think that that's all there is, right? But then I start teaching them and they realize there's layer upon layer of higher that they can go. There's no limit to the accomplishment you can achieve, right? And absolutely. It's really sad when someone thinks they can't learn anything more. Like I've been doing it for 35 years and I'm still learning every day.
Exactly. It's ongoing. It's absolutely ongoing. And I love that intersection between our sexuality, are the power, being able to access the power of our sexuality and use it for the transformation of consciousness and the enrichment of our life experience. And so that's why the art of semen retention for men is so precious to me, because I've seen such a profound blossoming for men who learn to control their ejaculatory response and become fully multi-orgasmic, separating orgasm from ejaculation and becoming expert hoverers, as you say.
Yes.
So it's so enriching to be able to facilitate that process for men in a way that's healthy and supportive.
Yeah.
And so go on.
Yeah. I wanted to add from what we said last show was that ejaculation for women is highly beneficial, because while a man is ejaculating 100 milliliters of semen and of which 2% of that is sperm, a woman can ejaculate 2 liters. That's like more than half a gallon for Americans, right? And this cleanses the whole body. Right, and I've written and studied extensively the imprinting of trauma onto soft tissues.
Yeah.
So, for example, I've just worked recently with a woman who was raped when she was a teenager, and that made a permanent impression on her soft tissues in her abdomen. Right, and for all these years, she's been carrying the trauma. Right, and I said to her, yes, I'm going to do some deep transverse therapy on some lymphatic massage. I'm going to teach you how to do lymph discharge, ejaculation. Right, and this will cleanse all of these contaminants that are now concentrated in your soft tissues that have been there since the traumatic event. Right, and I said, the problem is you're going to be very sick tonight, because these toxins are going to go into your blood. They're not all going to be discharged, but some will go in your blood and make you feel really sick. And sure enough, next day she felt hungover and nauseous and whatever, but then she felt better than she had in 20 years.
Exactly.
Because you got all of these toxins out of the body for the first time.
Yes.
So I believe this really, really helps people, that ejaculation is incredibly healthy for women. And
well, yeah, and that's the thing.
This is why I've always thought that you should give courses through your amazing institute
we
on how
absolutely
to do G-spot ejaculation for women, right?
And we do teach to a degree, not the same techniques that you teach. And so it'd be great to do a course with you as well. But that is absolutely, and not just the ejaculation. I do want to for our audience to let them know that the ejaculatory response in men is different than the ejaculatory response in females. For men, your life force is tied up in your ejaculation. So it has a different effect on your body and your chemistry than for females. For female bodies, our life force is tied up in menstruation and childbearing. So we do exercises to retain our life force when we bleed every month, so that we're not leaking chi and bleeding chi along with the actual menstrual blood. Yeah. So that's the difference. So the female body can squirt, can ejaculate, can have these emissions, infinitely without losing any of her life essence. And so that's why it's so important to make that distinction, because for men, your life essence is directly tied to your ejaculate. That's why it's so important to retain that fluid and utilize it for nourishment.
Well said.
Yeah, excellent. So we are coming to the end of our show.
You want to talk a bit about our next month's show on the future of sex?
Yeah, so we're going to do a show on the future of sex. I'm getting a note here that we have 3 minutes. So if you talk about that in 1 minute, then we're going to close the show. That would be fabulous.
Okay, so technology is dramatically altering the way humans interact. The internet, incredible, the most powerful tool ever invented by humanity. Every human mind can now communicate with every other human mind. It's already been demonstrated that nervous systems can be tied together through the internet. So you have electrodes, and you can have actual emotions transmitted through the internet. This has already been done, tying 2 nervous systems together. So this is called telesex, right? Where you would interact with your loved one, even if they're the other side of the world, and have an incredible sexual experience, right? I don't know if this is good or bad. We have to see what happens here. Already there's some evidence, there's some harm being done. 30% of millennials, millennial boys, are unable to get an erection and ejaculate with a real woman. They need porn to achieve ejaculation. And that's not a good development, that you need porn and a woman is not enough. Well, that's not a good development, right? So there's an example of the harm that can occur from technology. And that's only the beginning, because in Japan now there's the development of sex bots, right? Where these dolls or robots look perfectly human, and they're accessible in every way, orally, anally, vaginally, right? And so this is a an entity that will never have a headache, never say no, never be difficult, right? So some Japanese men are now preferring these sex bots to their spouses. Right?
So we're going to have a conversation about in the next year, 2019, we're going to have a conversation about the impact of technology on human sexuality and kind of examine whether this is just weigh it all. Like there's, with everything, there's positives and there's negatives. There's pros and there's cons. So examine it in more detail. And so for tonight, we're going to end the show thanking you for joining us again. And I'm so grateful to have your expert eye on these studies and your 30 years of experience, 30 plus years of experience in the realm of sacred sexuality and conscious sexuality, sharing with our audience. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope that we were able to answer many of your questions. And if not, please feel free to shoot us an email at connect@authentictantra.com. We're happy to answer as many questions as we possibly can. I also do have a special offer for you amazing listeners this evening, those men who are tuning in. I do have an ejaculation mastery video course, an online course that guides you step by step through the process of separating orgasm from ejaculation and gives you the safe, clear, clean methods for doing this expertly and very effectively and quickly, because we want it to happen as soon as possible often. You will see results in a very short period of time if you maintain your practice as instructed, or at least that's what my male students who have done the course have shared with me. So I encourage you to go to semenretentionmastery.com, and if you enter the code SEXISMEDICINE at checkout, you'll get $50 off the total cost of the course. So again, that's semenretentionmastery.com, and the code is SEXISMEDICINE, and you enter that at checkout and you'll get $50 off. And again, if you have any questions about that, reach out to us at connect@authentictantra.com. That code does expire at midnight on November 23rd. So I thank you again and encourage you to stay connected with us between shows at authentictantra.com. You can go to our website, or you can catch us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at Authentic Tantra. And you can also review this show and learn more about Dr. Paul Tanari and how you can stay in contact with him between shows as well. Thank you so much. I believe it's time to go. Have a wonderful night, and I will see you next month.